Hello and welcome to another SonicLAB. Today we're looking at something called the Artiphon Orba, which is a really interesting little instrument from a company called Artiphon. They also make something called Instrument One, which is a kind of guitar-based controller. And they have some unusual approaches to the way they do things. In fact, you may recognise this because we did film something with them at last year's NAMM, which does seem like such an awfully long time ago now, doesn't it? But it's what it essentially is a little self-contained instrument. It's got a 4-part synth engine. I just turn it on. It's got little LEDs that are around the end of each thing. It's got a loop recorder. It's also got a built-in speaker, so you can work it in standalone. I've got this plugged into the little 1/8" jack because stereo jack, because we want to be able to hear it a bit more clearly. It's actually quite substantial. It's also got haptic feedback, and it sort of rattles a bit. But not only that, it's got lots of different gesture controls. So we can actually move it in space, shake it around, tap it, press buttons. We can change the position on each pad, changes something. And this is quite an interesting idea. So it's quite an expressive little thing. It also transmits a lot of this stuff over MIDI, which means we could use it as a controller. In fact, I will demonstrate how that works. But this is behind me is the app that you can see. And that allows you to change different sound packs, because right here, the sounds I've got, I press and hold the middle and I change the sound. So I've got chord, bass and lead. So we go to the bass. You can see I'm using some positional data, and tilting it creates some other kind of tonal variation. We can change the octave. So everything sort of happens around the middle. It's sort of very touch orientated. Let's go on to chord sound. Got some interesting sounds. I loaded these from the application. Unfortunately, you can't do this from the synth itself. It has to put the settings, but the actual synth engine is built inside. And so the first thing you're going to ask is, ooh, can we program it ourselves? And the unfortunate answer to that is not right now. I don't know whether that's ever going to happen, but it would be very interesting if people could do that. In fact, that would be a bonus from as far as I'm concerned, because it means we could create our own sounds, maybe use a sound generation tool, and just personalize it a bit more. But it's also got a built-in looper, so we can record. You can hear the metronome going off there. And you can record each track, including the expression, alongside it, or and play a track over the top. So it's actually got quite a lot of features in it. A bit more about controls. I showed you the speakers, and it feels quite solid. It's made of plastic, but it does have this haptic feedback. It's got a vibration thing in it as well. We've got 1/8" jack out for stereo, for the line out, but obviously we can hear it. USB for connectivity, so we can use that to connect to the app. We can connect via Bluetooth, though I'm actually quite far away from my laptop at the moment. I'll bring that over here. The connectivity is from here to my laptop is probably about 6 or 8 meters, and it doesn't seem to be able to handle that. It uses Bluetooth LE, MIDI LE, I think that's the thing. But if you're closer, you can definitely use it wirelessly. Okay, so I set up the split screen here. You can see here's the Orba. I've got it connected over the USB-C that's coming into the Mac here, just direct connection, and the audio is coming out and going into Blue Box just via this 1/8" jack cable, just so that we can hear it properly. So as you can see, when I tap the central button, I'm cycling through the available sounds, of which there are obviously 4. So I could do that, or I can just select it via pressing and holding. You can hear there is a little bit of a glitch on the changeover. I don't know if that's just peculiar to my setup or because I've got the USB set in. So anyway, we've got some drums here, got a bass, and you can hear and see that there are a number of axes of expression, certainly on the bass sound. Then we've got chords. Again. And we've got velocity sensitivity and positional sensitivity. Then we've got a lead sound. We've got pitch bend, we can wiggle. So we've got a number of different controls. I don't like the lead sound. The only way I can change that is by going into Browse, and then I've got this sort of fixed set of presets. I'm sure that these are going to be added to in the future. So let's change that to, let's see what ambient sounds like. We'll load that. Actually quite similar to the other one, but with loads of reverb on it. So I suspect there is actually quite a lot of sound capabilities in here, including effects. And again, you know, if we could have a voice editor, that would be great. But what I say, I get the sense that this was actually created more as a kind of fun handheld toy, and then as these other capabilities came along, they're kind of like, okay. So I think there's an ongoing firmware, and in fact, if we go back to this main screen, I close this down, I open the Orba default song, you can see I've got song name, tempo, artist, and the keys, because I can set the keys major, minor, so it allows me to actually kind of have influence over the notes and change the key however I wish. So, you know, it's actually quite useful, but we can't currently save the songs in here. I think that's a feature that they introduced and then it wasn't quite working right. So they've actually, what they've done now is it's coming back, but they're going to be a new improved coming back. And that will be very useful because obviously once I've set all of this up and maybe played some notes in, then I might want to actually save that song. Anyway, the reason I was doing that is because I'm going to hit here and I'm going to tap tempo. You can see I can tap the tempo. I quite like around about da, da, da. Let's see if I can get it to about about 75 would do me fine. So now let's see how we record. So we're going to the drum mode. I've got these really quite interesting sounds. There's no way of setting the levels of these. To me, this is too loud compared to the other sounds, but I don't have any control over turning that down, so I'll just have to avoid that. So now I'm going to press record. Metronome, you can turn that off if you want. So that was what, 8 bars. So, and it's automatically, intelligently kind of cropped it and looped to the nearest boundary. So I'm going to add some extra sounds over this. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Come out of record. Bit jazzy. Let's try a bass sound. So come into the bass. Got some interesting, expressive possibilities. We can slide, we can tilt. I think there's a vibrato there because you're supposed to be able to do this as well. It's a bit loud though, and I would like to have been able to adjust the relative levels, but there doesn't seem to be any way to do that, and that's a little bit annoying because this bass sound kind of tends to blot out all of the drums that I've done. But anyway, let's see if I can just 2, 2, 3, 4. It's coming round. It's showing me 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. seems to have recorded okay. Let's try a chord sound. Now I'm struggling to hear some of the sounds against these other ones. Let's just record some of this. Nice. If the mix is a little bit off, what's happening if we go onto the lead sound? Yeah, it sort of works, but you can hear there's a bit of a struggle for sort of dominance in the sound, because I think maybe the bass sound is too big and there's probably a kind of maximum amount of output that this has. So, it's not the most sort of amazingly dynamic 64-bit mix engine, but, to get an idea down, I mean, I could be wearing a pair of headphones with that and it'd be just kind of fun to be doing this. I'd be lost in my own little world. But the thing that's quite good about this also is we can translate a lot of this, the note on, the velocity, the movement, all the controller stuff into the computer over MIDI as well, whether that's the USB MIDI or whether it's the Bluetooth MIDI. So let's take a look at that. So here we are in live. Let's take a look at what we've got set up. We've got a different port for each of the Artiphon parts, and I've switched them all on. We can use it in remote mode, and I'll get onto that in a sec. But the other thing that I didn't know, which is actually really cool, is we can use, once we're connected on USB, we can use the Artiphon Orba speaker as an output as well. Which means what I'm doing here is, if I come back to my, I'm basically in input mode, and I'm playing the drum sounds that are on my Ableton drum track, because I've selected the drum. So if I now go to the bass, and the sound is coming in via the USB and out via this. So we're monitoring it directly through the Orba, which I don't know exactly how useful that is, but I wasn't expecting that capability. So I go into chord mode. I've also got, if I go to chord mode, I've got a little Freeze Machine instance, which I actually recorded the audio on this track. So if we now come into auto mode, I recorded a few patterns. So here we go. This is very, very simple. Now, nothing all that thrilling, but what is really cool about this is now we can use some of the gestures and the movements in Orba to control things in live. So if I come back to my main screen, I'm going to go into MIDI map mode. I'm going to go into my bass, and I'm just going to wiggle. I'm going to control the volume of that pad. So I'm going to use 112, which is I think is tilt. So now you can see if I'm shaking, you see I'm shaking the Orba, and it's affecting. So which is actually a very useful thing. Now, it's not all good, because if I go to my, I've got a MIDI monitor here, which I'll show you. It does spit out rather a lot of stuff. So if I clear this, so we've got notes, channel pressure, brightness, this is per note. And then when I'm turning, we've just got absolutely tons of data coming out. So it can be a little bit hard to set up, but there is something that they've included which is quite useful. So if I now go back to this page and I go to my bass sounds, you can see these grayed out. I can filter the output of what I want the Orba to output in terms of MIDI. So only move, only shake, only rotate. and you can load those into the Orba so that you can sort of limit the amount of data that's coming out of it. One little fact here, this doesn't come as standard. It only comes, you have to go to their website and download these additional patches and then drop them in. There's instructions on how to do this. But it does mean that you can kind of hone down exactly what information you want this to be dealing with. But it does bring up another issue, which is quite often the difference between twist, move, tilt is not all that distinct. So we're basically just spitting out a ton of information. So it does have some very useful uses, but it's not all that easy to kind of pinpoint the exact gesture that you want. Obviously, if you're using something like just this, then you get a lot more possibility, and just this. So, you know, it is possible. But I would say, you know, it's perhaps not, you know, the answer to all your dreams in a gesture-based controller, but it's certainly really useful. And just being able to shake in a rhythm is actually a great way of putting data in there. Right, I just want to show a little bit more with the MIDI stuff, because it is possible to put this into MPE mode, which I've got here. So I've switched it into MPE mode, and what I've got is Reaper and just a single instance of pigments. I'll just minimize this. So we'll open pigments. I'm going to switch MPE mode on. I've given it quite a high buy rate, range, and I changed this to relative unipolar. So that means now I can play individual notes with expression over MPE. Automatic, obviously only 8 of those notes, but I am getting individual control. I think this axis is controller 74 as the standard MPE, and this is pitch bend. So it's a limited use, but the fact that it does MPE is quite surprising and could be useful. Now, I suppose the thing is with this, I mean, let's not forget, this thing is like, what, 99 bucks? It's not expensive. It does a lot of different things, some of which you might find useful. I think the shake is almost, you know, because you could use that for percussion and sort of driving rhythmic things, which are much harder to do via pads. You get a kind of momentum and a swing to it. So I think that's actually quite positive. Things I'd like to see would be, obviously, an editor, and I want to see song saving come back in, and it can be a little bit clunky. I did have a few moments where it got a bit kind of glitchy, but on the whole, for the price and the utility of it, really quite a nice little piece of equipment. So that was the Artiphon Orba, available pretty much, I think you can buy it directly from the website, priced at 99 bucks.